My name is Lillian Kawasaki, and I'm a director at Water Replenishment District. We do groundwater, and a member of the council. My question is really to ask you maybe the top 3 things, very specifically, kind of actionable items that you believe would be necessary to really foster this partnership to build the green technology and the economic value that goes with that.
Okay. Panelists? Anyone willing to step up immediately? Bill?
I'll say a little. I'm not sure I'll get to 3. I think we've seen many times, we've seen MOUs, we've seen agreements, we've seen discussions, and no follow-through. So I think absolutely it's putting some real emphasis on the implementation and being sure that we're really getting done what we said we were going to do. And I think it came up this morning in the discussions with the senior senator. You make a deal, you set a deal, you carry through. No matter, we have many changes and many things that affect us. So I think, number 1, I think that's the thing that I would argue for. And then to understand the rules of engagement effectively across all these sectors. I mean, in technology and intellectual property, in demonstrating things, to have really understand how to be effective engagers and also to be respectful of cultures and people and the business world and the climate that people have to operate in. So I got to 2. Maybe I'll stop there.
Great. Additions? Osama?
May I? Okay.
Of course.
So one thing is, I think, as Guido was saying, there are a huge number of projects that are ongoing on a domestic basis. And probably, although the information that is created by this is actually a kind of a source of competitive advantage, so there is a certain sensitivity there as well. But to try and share as much information as possible so that we do not kind of, duplicate efforts. That would be very important going forward, and I think some of the things that are being done globally, creation of global federation, ISCAN, there is also a government-to-government kind of framework for that as well that is being created. These will be very important going into the future. One thing also is getting companies to work together. Of course, all companies have a tendency of not invented here. They like to do everything themselves, if at all possible, especially Japanese companies and large companies like IBM also maybe. But to try to get companies to work together, I think that is very important because every company, no company can do everything itself. And actually, innovation is actually created when different people interact with other people. So I think that is a key thing going forward. And 3, when we think of deploying, changing over to the new infrastructure, standardization is very key. So I think that would be 3 important things that we have to think about. And when we think of global standardization, I think Japan and US can work very effectively together with Europe and other countries. So,
Guido?
Yeah, but now 3 have been mentioned, right? So, as well as, but I agree with all the previous points. I think, let me just add then one thing. You mentioned, Osamu, the collaboration. No one company can do this alone. If I would, IBM has about 150 projects over the last 8, 9, 10 years we have been doing in the smart grid space. Probably none of those projects is just simply from IBM to a utility company. It's almost part of a consortium, of a group. And I think one of the things you drive value nowadays in today's business is by being able to show to your client that you're able to do that and be proactive in that area. So I fully agree on the topic of collaboration. The other thing perhaps to add, and you mentioned all the right points, I fully agree on standards, but the other thing perhaps also at a government level, our CEO of IBM is always very articulate on the topic that needs to be a business initiative, right? We shouldn't depend always on policy and regulation, but nevertheless, I think in the energy area, it's extremely important that we build a common understanding between us how important this topic is. And I know sometimes to provoke in the US, I say in the US we have stumbled over the last year over healthcare. Interesting, I cannot vote, I only have a green card, but I of course follow the discussions, right? And then people stumble over each other on that topic. And I sometimes to provoke say, well, perhaps the energy topic is more important. And the reason I say that, if we really acknowledge that transformation of the energy system is foundational to economic growth, to energy security, to addressing climate change, then perhaps that is a more important topic, because how can we address difficult topics like healthcare if there's no economic growth? So I think if our governments have a common understanding about the importance and I think that instill that within their ecosystem, etc., I think it will go a long way.
Great. So the problems and therefore the opportunities are large enough for there to be enabled collaboration and cooperation among multiple parties. But at the same time, thank you, Guido, for bringing us back to these common themes of security, jobs and economy, and environment. Other questions in the audience, please.
Thank you. I actually have a series of questions that are interrelated. The first is the electrical grids of the two nation states, U.S. and Japan. Are they fundamentally interoperable? That is, do they operate on the same standards, or are they quite different in the way that they operate? And in shifting to smart grid, will there have to be, can you use the existing infrastructure, the electrical grid, or do you have to alter it? Do you have to add to it? I mean, what is the process by which this infrastructure is created, expanded? Second, standards, industrial technological standards, interoperability. To what extent, since utilities are a national operation, is there communication between the two countries in the achievement of, say, new standards that can be utilized in both countries? The importance of that is, I think, pretty obvious for going forward. The third question is, utilities are a public, in many cases, in Japan at least, a public enterprise. In the United States, it's public and private. The utilities operate on a different set of objectives, namely reliability, than private companies that are going to be involved in smart grid. So how do you get public utilities in a dialogue with and consortium of cooperation with private companies? Private companies not only within your own countries, but maybe even internationally. And finally, security. Is the smart grid that we foresee in the future going to be more vulnerable, less vulnerable, as vulnerable to hackers, to various threats to security and stability as our current electrical grid?
Thank you for a very complex set of questions. And I'm going to do my best to try to work with the panel to get to each and every one of them, because I do think they carry out some of the themes that have been brought up. On the first question of interoperability of systems across nations, Bill, you want to try to handle that, and maybe I'll ask Osama after that if he has any.
They're basically, systems operate, much of the fundamentals are the same. Biggest difference in the world is, do you operate at 60 hertz or 50 hertz frequency, and your equipment has to all be, so remember you have to take adapters when you go from country to country in different places of the world. So, but the fundamentals behind all of it are the same. And in fact, Tokyo Electric is one of the largest members of the Electric Power Research Group in the United States, and a contributing member and doing many demonstrations with other utilities in other parts of the United States as an example. So there's a lot of commonality. If I may go
Sure.
a little bit to the legacy issue.
A commonality, but they are different.
But they are different. And so you need to, if you're a producer of equipment, like General Electric, for example, you have to create a gas turbine and operate at 50 hertz. You have to create a gas turbine that operates at 60 hertz, as an example.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No problem. Just to touch on the legacy, I personally don't see how, take the United States and in Japan, we could afford not to take advantage of the fact that we have a legacy system. Because, as I pointed out earlier, I think we cannot forget in our enthusiasm to go after our favorite technology or to really want to solve problems, that we have to protect consumer interest in this. And so to keep the cost minimal as we make smart transitions, because we're asking for a cascade of transitions to happen. We're asking about build out the existing system. We're looking at growth of electricity demand. we're talking about smarter homes, smarter cars, smarter everything, and you add those cumulative costs, and it's a lot of money. And the ultimate source of that money is the taxpayer, the ratepayer. And so we have to balance that in how we position and plan for these and take advantage of the synergies among all these things to truly be effective. And the legacy system is the starting